There we go. Sorry about that false start. Welcome everyone. It's our first 2026 event of the year, as I say. This Experts at Work webinar for members of all three of our networks is exploring overcoming resistance to change. So I'm really grateful to Jen Lawrence, one of our advisory board members, for suggesting this. Great subject, really. Jen's an expert on employee experience and leadership development, following an award-winning career as an HR director with Unilever,
Oh,
Lindt, Virgin, amongst others. Do let us have any suggestions and questions in the chat throughout. We're recording the session, as you've just heard, for our members' YouTube channel. We'll send out the link afterwards with Jen's slides. We've got a breakout room for this a little bit later to give you a chance to talk about your experience of change and resistance to change. You probably saw on the WhatsApp group there was a suggestion that you bring something from your either life or work life to discuss. And we'll have a hard finish at 2:55 p.m. This is a brand new innovation for 2026, finishing 5 minutes early to give you a chance for a cup of tea. Other domestic beverages are available. So, lovely stuff. Jen, thank you so much for doing this. Pop yourselves on mute, everybody, for now. Not you, Jen, it wouldn't be the same. And the floor is yours.
it would be a very quiet hour, but maybe sometimes one that we could all do with. Anyway, lovely to see so many of you on the call today, and thank you so much for coming along to hopefully also share your experience of change as we go through as well. So, as an HR director of old, and doing some coaching and some leadership development stuff, this topic seems to kind of always come around. And I think never in such a popular time as January, where we're all trying to make New Year's resolutions and stick to them. And ironically, the 12th of January was seen as Quitters' Day for New Year's resolutions. People often have right intentions, of course, but sometimes when we get to the new year, we almost turn up with a bit of a failed expectation as well from the start. So perhaps if you've set yourself an expectation or something you wanted to do for the new year and you are struggling a bit with the change, maybe this will be a nice personal one for you. Um, but I think what really comes down to a lot of this work today is around thinking about the rapid innovation that's going on, whether it's globally or within our businesses, whether it's with AI or thinking about social governance and so forth. There's lots of change going on right now, and in this complex world, we're trying to help our leaders obviously navigate through that. And I guess we can kind of look at change as a common thread through business, and you can see organizations struggling with it and leaders trying to get to grips with it. There are companies that thrive in it and there are some that haven't. And obviously, there's some really known experiences like, and companies we know like Kodak, Blockbuster, Woolworths, if you're as old as I am. But, you kind of look at a few in the frame at the moment and you wonder, are they going to survive? The likes of Argos, for example, that Sainsbury's are trying to sell and don't seem to be able to. So it's kind of thinking about some of the changes that we all go through. How do we get stuck sometimes and how can we move forward? So the objectives of this session really today are a few in here for you to think about. So why change matters. We're going to talk about kind of some of the experiences, some of the theory around change actually on the next slide, if that's all right, Richard. I don't know if it's got stuck. But the practical steps, perhaps some techniques that you can use to support yourself and others through change, and almost give yourself a bit of a peer opportunity as well. I suggested perhaps bringing in an example, and we're going to have a look at Immunity to Change, which is a great book that hopefully I can give you a bit of a shortcut to as well. So, why this work matters then? So, if you think about some stats that I'm sharing with you here, 25% of CEOs worry about the sluggish response to change. I think from an HR point of view, there's an expectation here that managers are not adequately equipped to lead change, and 73% indicating that employees are experiencing change fatigue as well. So there's a lot of that going on. So there's some references here from Harvard, but I think it's quite interesting that it implies that change readiness is no longer optional, but is expected through all leadership levels. So just as we'll probably sat at our desk, I thought a nice little exercise we could do just to even look at what change is about. So if you can open your own arms really wide, and then I want you to bring them back together and kind of clasp your fingers into a fist. And look at your thumbs. Is your right thumb over your left thumb, or is your left thumb over your right thumb? Okay, open your arms again. And I want you to do exactly the same thing. Just close them up, put your fists together, and have a think. Look at your thumbs again. And has your right hand got your left thumb over it, or the other way around? Is it the same, perhaps? So, a really simple exercise, perhaps one you've done before, but Tony Robbins says that if you put your right over your left, then it means you're creative. Don't know if that helps you, Anton, on the art course. And if they're parallel, it means you're romantic. So I don't know if anyone's got one of those on the room. And if you've got your left over your right, it means you're intelligent. Now, I have no idea whether that's scientifically based or not, but I thought it was a bit of fun. So back to the exercise. So this time we're going to change it. So when you next open your arms, what I'd like you to think about is switching your thumbs over to the opposite of what you were doing a minute ago. So open your arms up really wide when you're ready, and then try and close them again. But this time, put the thumb the opposite one on top that you had before, and just notice what's going on there. Does it feel a bit uncomfortable? Did you have to put some effort into thinking about putting one thumb differently or intentionally over the other? And if this is something that we then went and did and we practiced a bit more, perhaps we get more comfortable adapting to that change, but it becomes a new way. But it often takes time, focus, and acceptance of perhaps a bit of discomfort along the way. And I really see us as HR directors getting caught in a similar kind of thing. We're trying to make change. People are pushing us to make this exercise look as easy as possible or as fast as we can. But as we know, it takes a while to do, and it takes us a while to get this right. So change sometimes becomes something that people survive rather than get led through. And just very simply doing this exercise with the thumbs just reminds us that actually it takes a bit of adapting. So if I jump onto some theory then, so there are inevitably a few theorists out here on change. It's a well documented subject, as we know, but there's a couple of things that I've been looking into that I think just really chime with the kind of situations we find ourselves in. So we often find change comes in many forms, and they're probably categorized in one of these three, either shock, evolution, or from a strategic point of view. So from a shock, it could be immediate, it could be unexpected. So this might look like a sudden CEO exit or a redundancy program where HR has to become the stabilizer, perhaps the translator, the emotional container, having to be around to help manage all of this. Sometimes there's the evolutionary version of change. So this might be more incremental or gradual. So it could be a system upgrade, God love IT. It might be around hybrid working norms, but it's more of a slow drift. And that can sometimes lead to some confusion and inconsistency because are we doing this or are we going back to the way we were? And then the strategic change can come about more planned and deliberate. So it might be an organization integration, a restructure. It might be a culture shift you're going for, a performance framework. So often HR is involved in designing it, whilst leaders perhaps are still in the process of going, why are we doing this? What's this about? So while our responses to the types of change might vary, it's important to recognise that all change requires some kind of transition process, no matter what it is. And if you think back to the thumb exercise, that's a kind of indicator of that as well. And even if we can see change as positive and we have got time to plan, and even when we know the reason for change, it can still be a challenge to navigate through the transition process. And that's kind of where I had a look at some quite helpful models here, and there's a couple that I'm going to share now. So Lewin is probably one that's pretty well known. I mean, he dates back to the 1940s, and always love HR. We love quoting dead people. But one of the things in his adapted model here is known as the unfreeze, change, refreeze process, which Lewin, as a physicist as well as a social scientist, explained in organization change terms as an analogy for how we think about change with a block of ice. So if you have a large cube of ice, but realize that what you want to do is make a cone instead, first of all, you need to melt the ice to make it amenable to the change. So that's, I guess, the unfreeze process. But then you need to be able to mold the ice or the water again into a shape that you want to change. And finally, of course, you need to solidify that. And that's the refreeze process that goes with it. So, to begin any successful process, we firstly need to understand why the change must take place. And unfreezing isn't just about communication volume, though, it's about leadership visibility throughout. And as Lewin kind of put it, really, motivation for change must be generated before change can occur. So, someone must be helped to re examine many of the assumptions that might be held either by themselves or in relation to others. And this is the unfreezing stage, which I think is where change kind of begins. And from an HRD example, someone that I was coaching recently talked about her own experience of HR going through a change. And she said when she was put at risk, there was really great comms around why they were changing, what the new structure could potentially look like. But she said actually the execution of it was really poor. So it left her with a really difficult transition because she felt terrible through the process and therefore was left afterwards wondering, even in a fixed term contract role, did she really want to stay? And that's somewhat because whilst we sometimes in HR get very clear about where we want to go and what the structure looks like, sometimes change happens within that process itself. And sometimes people are not clear about that. Roles get offered, people find things out ad hoc. In this case, a manager was even late to attend the selection process of the interview, so she felt of back-footed for that. Managers and leaders don't always follow up very well with unsuccessful candidates, those that are leaving, and yet all through this process, it's about that experience. So, from an HR director point of view, we often know why we want the change to happen, but we sometimes misunderstand or maybe underestimate how that misalignment actually can exist in the business and how it plays out. So we're often hearing leaders say, we're all in this together, but then they don't behave in a way that helps the change happen. Or, we have feedback channels, but we're not giving that psychological safety that people need going through change. So I'm pleased to say that the person I was talking about actually has decided to stay and ironically is now helping them design a change management situation and some right tools along the way. So when we're looking at this why, this stage, this is the Beckart Harris change equation, which I really like because I think it really helps us as leaders figure out where the resistance to change is happening. And in the 70s, these researchers found that large, complex organizations actually aren't very good at change, and perhaps more importantly, they're not good at predicting the likelihood that change will be successful either. So very often we get leaders who say, oh, this is going to be really easy, or I'm sure we can get through this in a couple of months. And so what they also said was their predictive power was almost as bad as their ability to change. So these researchers went and had a look at what were the major parts of the dissatisfaction being one of them. But to get change working, they recognized that there were four factors: dissatisfaction, clear vision, having concrete steps, and thinking about resistance. So it's not just about talking about the bottom line, for example, but how this will affect our numbers, but it's more about kind of how will they be less stressed? How will it be more engaging? So sometimes it's about looking at the vision from a kind of a bigger picture. Sometimes it's about dissatisfaction. So this boils down to clearly identifying the why behind the change. And when we don't really get the why out very clearly, people get really frustrated and they say things like, oh, we're just changing things for the sake of it again. And I know that certainly chimes and resonates with me in the past where we've done change and we've thought we've been super clear about why we're doing it, but it hasn't really landed with people very well. And then the third point in terms of pushing this arrow to the right is around the first concrete steps. So actually trying to break this down into small parts of change. So how are we going to make this work? And sometimes when we look at change, we're sometimes looking at a great big mountain. And if we can help people see incremental change and how it needs to go about, it really does help to push that kind of line to the right and help to stop resistance. Which is what the theorist was about. So change isn't a rip of the band-aid. You don't get people just suddenly going, yeah, I get it. Some people, for example, in IT will help break things down. So perhaps if it's a new system, it will be as simple as here's a login, here's a profile picture, have a go at just uploading that, rather than here's a whole new system, go and play, because we know that we lose people when we do it like that. So um, So the second stage really then, and I've put some real practical things in here for consideration on the unfreeze, is really understanding why the change takes place, determining what needs to change by surveying the team, the organization, and sometimes just even putting potential points of failure or looking at levels of risk to identify where we might get some barriers or resistance, as in the model I've just shown you. And then perhaps think about some stakeholder mapping. So, how can we win support? Who are your early adopters to change? Framing the issue as an organisation-wide importance. Sometimes I think we present a change as something that is going to make a difference, but if we can really help see the impact we're going to have as a result, can be super compelling. And using your vision and strategy. So, how does it fit back into the bigger plan? How is it going to be an enabler for the future? But re-emphasizing that why throughout is a super important part of this unfreeze point. So it would be remiss of me not to mention in stage at the next stage the change piece. So I think you're probably all really super familiar with this model of change that is the Kolber-Ross change curve. And what I've tried to do here is find a version which is overlaying a second theory, actually, which is the William Bridges stage of transition, which is about endings, neutral zone, and new beginnings. And whilst the Kolber-Ross is probably more associated with therapy and perhaps thinking about going through a significant change, I think it was actually created as a proactive bereavement tool. The kind of essence in the corporate world, of course, is around having a look at where people emotionally are going through the change and helping people perhaps identify with some of the known emotional changes that are going to connect with this as well. So I won't dwell on kind of the theory too much, but I think there's a couple of things here just to pull out that are very helpful in terms of thinking about timing, the depth of the feelings, the aspects of the fact that people can move back and forth across this curve. I think sometimes people see it as a linear process. And of course, you know, people sometimes get on board with something and get into the new beginning state, and then something completely ricochets and sends them a bit further back along the curve. So I think it's about understanding where people are in certain given times and helping managers to navigate that with their teams as well. But of course, that transition of unfreeze to change doesn't happen overnight, and people take time to embrace the new direction. And I think one of the things that we have is clear in that model, though, is that people must do two things, whether it's personal or work. They've got to be able to let go of the old way before they can embrace and learn the new way. And most resistance actually isn't opposition, it's just fear with language. So this is where I kind of went and had a look at some interesting theory around this in a bit more depth, which is around the immunity to change work. And one of the things that I think is quite interesting about this is thinking about change being is it, you know, are people being obstinate or are they being difficult? And how can we also hold some compassion and help people when they're getting stuck to then help shift into acceptance and then helping them to move on as well? So the model here, when is according to the psychologists of Robert Keegan and who was a Harvard professor, and Lisa Leahy. So their assumptions underpin a set of competing commitments that can conflict with genuine commitment to change. So there's an article on the web, and I might see if I can give it to you, Richard, to send out as well. But they did a lot of work around thinking about what goes on in people's emotions, what the views are, and some of the assumptions that come with that, which is really hard sometimes to separate from facts and reality, I suppose. So this means that while some are consciously wanting to change, and even outwardly, they might even say to us, yes, I'm up for this, I want to change. There's equally a strong internal desire not to do so. And this is what the research really helped them to identify, was the fact that they're often quite unaware about the change. And if to put it another way, it's almost like an internal conflict between their unconscious thoughts and desires and the need to change. So what does immunity to change look like? Well, it can be difficult to know whether someone has immunity to change until it's often too late, because often the person concerned is openly agreeing to change, but in reality, they're making little or no effort to change, or can they continue to do things the way they always have on the assumption that hopefully if they put enough sand in the cogs, it won't change at all. So the 5 steps that the immunity to change process looks at is shown in front of you here. And what they said is that there are a few things that really help to either coach or talk managers through to help people get on board. So the first one here is around commitment to a change goal. So firstly, being really specific. So what do you want to do differently? What has to change? What has to happen if you don't change? Is another way of thinking about it. And the change goal should not only be desirable, but essential. So the stronger the need to make the change, the more likely you are to actually achieve it. And then the second part then is describing the behavior that needs to change by thinking about what you are doing and perhaps what you're not doing as well. So by being able to get really honest about this, what are you currently doing that's preventing the goal from or the change from happening? Simply committing to things that you know you should be already doing is like making a bad news resolution, as I say. But instead, identify specific actions, behaviors that are preventing from achieving the changed goal. So the third step is then uncovering the hidden commitments. So perhaps considering the worst thing that could happen if you stop doing the actions you've described in step 2, and you did the opposite instead, for example, or you might have a strong emotional reaction at the heart of this. So perhaps it will make you feel uncomfortable or fill you with a sense of dread. So you may well have other worries too, and that's quite helpful to put in the worry box. So you might think, oh gosh, someone's going to think less of me, and your hidden competing commitment would therefore be, I'm committed to not offending people, or I'm committed to having people think well of me. Something like that becomes your competing commitments, which is what they get to the heart of. And then what we're trying to do then is tease out the big assumptions. So once you've clearly had a chance to look at your competing commitments, it's then identifying some of these assumptions that's sitting with it. So it wouldn't be so bad if I was committed to avoiding why would it be so bad if I'm committed to avoiding this happening? So why am I so afraid of doing something? And actually at this point, getting those assumptions out help you understand what you might need to do. You might have an aha moment at this point, and it might help you to then create some assumptions that you can then test and put into some action. So in my example here to show you, we have this is quite typical as well. Someone wanting to be more honest with feedback with their team. Perhaps they don't share honest feedback currently because they worry that it's uncomfortable to do it, or perhaps they want to soften the message because they don't know how it's going to land. So the competing commitments that come from that might look something like avoiding conflict, avoiding disagreements. Perhaps they don't want to look too bossy as well. So the worry box might be, if I express myself, I won't be liked. So it's almost connecting here to a value as well and what's important to them. And that's almost your kind of aha moment where you can then say, if I'm looking at a big assumption here, it might be that I see conflict as bad, or by saying something, it means that it looks like I don't care about somebody. And I had a brilliant, actually, personal experience of running this on a leadership recently on a program where I was working with an accountancy, and a partner there said that her goal was to go on holiday and be able to switch off and enjoy her time with her family. And she was really struggling to do this. So her approach to it, in truth, was that she was worried about losing clients. So what she was doing was being available or logging on or not handing over work when she went on holiday. And so we went through these steps, and actually what she realized when she got to the hidden competing commitments point was that she didn't quite trust her peers to steal her clients off her, because working in a partnership, there is an expectation that you need to be able to generate revenue and income. And one of her worries was actually that she was going to lose the client if she handed it over for a holiday period. So she had a bit of an aha moment here, actually, because she realized that she was not able to trust her colleague fully. And she also thought that they were going to take work from her. And when we challenged her a little bit and said, well, do your colleagues give you clients to look after when they go holiday? She was like, oh, yes. And I said, do you poach them? And she went, well, no, I give them straight back. So it actually became quite a helpful conversation because she could see the competing commitment that was right in front of her about not quite trusting her peers, but she wasn't being honest with them and having a conversation. So the action she took away from that was she was going to speak to the ones that she had a little bit of a concern over, talk through how she was going to hand the clients over and how she was going to have them back at the end of time. And last time I spoke to her, she tested this theory and it had worked really well for her as well. So, what we thought we would give you an opportunity and perhaps a little bit of headspace as HR directors is to have a go at this yourself. So, as I said at the start, if you've got an experience of something that you're going through with change, I thought perhaps what would be really nice is to give you the opportunity in a small working group to perhaps walk through some of these steps. Work with your peers here to get some questions going around things that are helping or not helping you to be able to move forward and change. Have a look at some of these blockers and see if you can get into a bit of a conversation around this immunity. And we won't share back because we're in a recorded session. So I would really like it if you had a kind of really great conversation, and perhaps after 15 minutes, we'll bring you back in the room and we'll take it from there.
Almost. So I'm ever so sorry.
Are you going to make it 10?
Well, something like that. It's I couldn't do the breakout rooms because I couldn't see the breakout room
Oh, I see.
option. Yeah. Thanks everyone. So I'm just gonna Jen, you've got a couple more slides, haven't you? So I was just gonna find this.
Yeah, so I want so as I said, we won't debrief kind of the personal part, but perhaps in a minute when we get to Q&As or perhaps reflections on what you've heard today, it'd be really lovely to hear what's what's coming up. I suspect there are elements of change in all of us going on right now. But as I mentioned at the start, there's a kind of this process of refreeze, change, and freeze again. So the last part of the process is about refreezing. So to the ice cone, I suppose. So, what can you do? What can you think of to lead for change? So, what I thought would be helpful for you here in the slides is to give you some opportunities to action some of these areas. So, if you're thinking about the change that you brought today, perhaps reminding yourself of the why might be something that you want to think about a bit more. It might be thinking about some of your language actually. So, do you notice people putting blockers like let's not, or we've tried that before, or that won't work? And actually, again, something that was a really interesting intervention from a coaching course I was on was someone said we might not be able to do it yet. So actually, the yet can be a really helpful way of telling people it might not be something that's going to happen immediately, but let's give it time. Let's try something because we don't know. And sometimes there's this bit of immunity because we don't know, so we put a story in our heads as to what it's going to be like. So perhaps there's a bit of shift of thinking there around I'll get to this, or rather than I have to, which feels like a burden, it's like I will get to this, or I will have a go because I actually don't know. The truth is we don't know how it's going to play out. And sometimes helping people find truths. And when I say truth, I mean like a really undeniable truth. So do we know that it's going to go in this direction? Well, no, we don't. But what's really true is that we don't know. So well, let's give it a go and see. It might be that you're thinking in this leading process as well around how to keep people informed and supported. It might also be about celebrating successes. Going back to the earlier theory about taking small steps, sometimes actually just celebrating those little wins can be a really helpful progression in terms of helping people who perhaps are still sitting on the fence or perhaps being watchers rather than activists of change and helping. So sometimes getting some milestones and successes across the line could be helpful. So there's a few little thoughts around that. And then I sort of leave you with the last slide, which is thinking about your experiment or something around change that you want to consider. So could you do something that is small and stretching yourself? What is it you need to do? What's the encouragement and feedback you could give yourself or someone else? And what will you need to do when you are living or not living your commitment here to your change as well? So we've got a few minutes as I sort of finish and wrap from my point of view. Just in terms of anything that's come up for you, any questions you have, anything that are just observations, actually, whether you resonated or you would like to challenge, I'm all up for that as well. So very happy to hear, or you could put something in the chat if you'd like to.
You coming in, Rupert?
Yeah, so I can certainly can. I'm certainly thinking of a few things. I really enjoyed the breakout and the provocation, and some models I'd not worked with before as well. I guess I was coming back to the vision actually. You know, the Beckett Harris on the left hand side to overcome resistance, and
Mm,
reflecting on how we can craft that from our own perspective as someone who's the architect of the change. But the way people react to it, it always surprises us.
mm,
Um, so there's some sort of logic gap. So I'm wondering whether or not maybe that vision needs to be crafted not just with people who also think of themselves as architects, but also as people who might be holders of resistance. Because I seem to have got it wrong on the current project I'm working on. Um,
bless you. Yeah, and I'm sorry that that's going on, but I think it's a great perspective actually to move around the situation. A little bit what I was saying earlier about the chairs around actually, if you see it from their view, what is it they're going to want to hear, see, experience, understand, and have we thought it through from them looking back at this change from a different angle? Because it might open up some thoughts that perhaps weren't aware at that point as well, and that might help with some of your thinking in the vision.
yeah, yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Rupert. Hello, Paula.
Hi, Richard. Thanks, Jen. Really, really great session.
Thank you.
I was reflecting, so the toolkit is brilliant, by the way. I was reflecting as HR professional, I think there is an assumption that we are change experts, and we
Mm,
don't typically have change training unless your organization is happy for you to do it and fund it or you drive it. But you're
true.
meant to be like I've been given the name like change ambassador, change guardian, these grand titles. I'm not sure really what
True.
that really means. Um, and I think because I don't know about anybody else, but so one thing is we're expected to do this without any solid, I think, qualifications or knowledge or expertise, although I think we
Mm,
probably have the soft skills to be able to do it, which is why it sits with us
mm.
so naturally. But also, our roles are always so busy. The quantum, I haven't met a HR professional yet that says, oh, yes, I have 3 hours spare in my week where I just sit and think about stuff. Everybody's running to stand still.
So
And
true.
actually, we're very focused on tasks. And I
Mm,
think this is quite a good practical tool to allow you to stop for a minute and go, actually, just stop thinking about the task and getting the to-do list done and getting the project over the line because it's busy. Think about actually the impact you're having, which is quite powerful, I think, quite helpful. It was just a
mm.
reflection rather than
Thank you.
anything
And I,
else.
yeah, and I really appreciate you sharing that, and thank you for your feedback as well. I think it's something I definitely think if these are a couple of tools that give you a bit of a sense of a step-by-step process or helping to just stop and reflect before you go into it. We quite often, I think, are so up against a particular restructure, which is where we're just expected to just then help implement at quite some speed sometimes as well. And of course, the resistance steps up the minute people feel like they're being pushed through something and done too. So, just hopefully if there's a few things in the slides that just help you work through a kind of a thought process, then great. Glad it's helpful.
Thanks, Paula. And Jane, hello.
Hello, Richard. Hi, Jen.
Hey, yeah.
Thanks for that. Really timely. The organisation I work for has just been acquired. In fact,
Ah,
it will be going through the courts tomorrow, and on Monday I'll be working for a different business. I don't know if that's going to be a long-term thing or not because we'll all be going through consultation as well. So lots of change happening.
gosh,
Um,
yes.
but we've been as part of our commitment, and we're the acquired business, but part of our commitment to our senior leaders and to our people managers has been to run sessions to help leaders and people managers navigate. So using some of the things that you've alluded to, but one of the other things that we developed was what we call an emotion wheel. I'm not sure if it's based on something else, but it's an emotion wheel. Do you imagine a picture of with kind of words in it, negative on one side, positive on the other, and getting people to use that as a way to put a name to how they're feeling. But the thing that you were making me think about with that earlier, particularly the bridges thing, was actually what we've heard is that people can coexist almost in two places on the change curve almost at once. Firstly, if that doesn't seem like, how can you be in two places? But we see that in the emotions wheel as well. People will have could have a positive emotion that's running concurrently with a negative emotion, so a fear perhaps, as well as an excitement. And that was just a sort of, I guess, a new reflection for me this time around, to actually explore with people. It's normal to have these what feel like opposite feelings happening concurrently, and just getting people to talk about it was helpful as a way of saying you're not going crazy. You will be vacillating between positive and negative, or indeed feeling those things simultaneously. It is possible as a human to feel both.
It's a great point, because in a bit of neuroscience, the amygdala bit that's really trying to say, like, look after us, that fear that comes with change when it's unknown to us or it's ambiguous, creates that kind of fight, flight, fawn, freeze sort of a mechanic in us. It's very natural, and it's great when we were cave people, because we were looking at lines going, that might eat me. Whereas now we look at fear, and it's because it's a programmed thing inside of us. Of course, we're not in quite the same civilized state, but it's still creating the same emotional impact on us. So for people to be able to relate, and I love the wheels on the internet. If anyone Googles the emotion wheel, it really helps, because sometimes people can use one word like anger, but of course anger has got like about multifaceted emotions around it. So actually it really helps people connect directly with the emotion they're feeling. And the other thing that's quite nice is the blob tree, if anyone's come across that, and various versions of that kicking around, which can be a little bit more fun way of getting teams to just accept and recognize where they are in any one given process as well. So thank you for bringing that, Jane. Great thoughts.
Thanks, Jane. Good luck with everything as well. Sorry, Jane, did you say the blob tree, BLOB?
BLOB.
Yeah, okay. I'll look both those up and put them in the. We'll send the slides around, Jen. Thanks ever so much, and also the recording. Jen, thank you ever so much for bringing such energy
You're welcome.
and insight to that. I've really enjoyed it, and lovely to see everyone. There's another Experts at Work in a couple of weeks. Do leave us some feedback in the chat, and we'll see you again soon. Jen, thank you ever so
Lovely
much.
to see you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Nice to see you all. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your week, and good luck with those New Year's resolutions.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Jen. Bye, everyone.